Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me just say that we get it. Personal development can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Project Endure has been on a mission to create a supportive and inspiring community of people, all striving to be better together. Head down to the link in the show notes and join the Hard Things Club so that we can do hard things together. And if you're already a member, invite a friend and spread the love. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 137. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and also in the city of Philadelphia, we have a very, very, very special guest, Justin Rubin. Justin, how's it going?
Joe, doing amazing. Super excited about today. And thank you so much for having me on. Sincerely, I know your outreach in the Philadelphia area and obviously across the world now, honestly, has been huge. So thanks so much for having me on.
Of course, man. It's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. And before we jump too far into anything, I would love for you to just introduce yourself to people listening who might not know who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Justin Rubin. I am a personal trainer in the city of Philadelphia. I also train in Bucks County. So I bounce back and forth between the city and the suburbs. But more than that, I am definitely training for a lot of different things. There's this term called hybrid athlete that's out there now. Truthfully, I don't know if I resonate with that or identify as that. I can provide a bunch of backstory to that, but I'm a friend, I'm a brother, I'm a son, and overall just trying to spread a lot of love and connect with a lot of people out here.
Yeah. You're a dog dad?
I am, oh, that is a great and timely question. I am a dog dad to Bentley, who is a 7th month old German Shepherd. I share her with my girlfriend Jess. And just this past Sunday, we had the luxury of, trusting her for 5 hours out of the cage to come home to a opened couch. And she is now spending 10 days. I've been joking around at boot camp, but she's now getting trained. So that's where Bentley's at. But loving that process, definitely new world for sure. And I know we've chatted a bunch about that experience. So thanks for all the insight and for more to come on Bentley's story.
I will say, after talking to you and Jess about Bentley, I am inspired by how much trust you guys put in your puppy because there's no way I would have ever left Theo out like that. And we've tested it out. We've left him out for 30 minutes, 60 minutes at a time. And now I think he's pretty good. But there were some times where, shoes would be chewed up, couches would be chewed, pillows would be on the floor. And so it's a learning experience. It's a fun one.
For sure. And we thought we had this magical pup at first who was so precious, like not biting anything. No, overnight that changed so quickly. No shoe is safe. And she actually bit a little bit into my race shoe for the New York City Marathon that I still wore. But I was definitely like, oh my God, when that happened.
Mm.
So fun experience. Definitely no regrets about it. But it's all learning from here on out for sure.
Yeah. So I figured as we get into your story, we could start with what potentially could be a pretty deep question. So I asked you before we started the podcast in the intake, what was the hardest question you've ever been asked? And you wrote simply, are you happy? And I'm wondering why that was the question that came to mind for you.
Yeah, I think that stems from just growing up, actually. You're always asked that question, hey, are you happy or you seem off? And that comes from a wide variety of things, parents, coaches, teammates, friends. Um, and I think in life, happiness is actually subjective. I think you'll ebb and flow through life. There will always be some high moments, but at the same time, there will always be low moments that not a lot of people will see unless you're really close to that person. So I think when you're asked, are you happy? It's more or less yes, but there's also this other factor that's going on that nobody can see that deep down I'm struggling with, or a lot of people are struggling with. So I think at times the happiness moments, the happy moments in life can actually be overshadowed by the unhappy moments. But yet we walk around, big smile on our face, pretending everything's okay to the outside world. And so I think that's a hard question for me to answer. And especially, truth be told, and I'll be very, very vulnerable on this podcast with you. And this year, that question has been asked to me a lot. And I lie sometimes to say, yeah, truth be told. And we'll dive into that a little bit more, I'm sure. But I think that's a hard question to ask anybody. Are you happy? Because there are highs and lows throughout the day.
Yeah, that's fair. And I would also say that sometimes the happiest people on the surface are the ones that are hurting the most. And I know there's a part of your story that we will dive into here in a little while. But before we get there, I want to ask you in this season of life, right now, in this moment, are you happy?
I am happy. I'm thrilled with where I'm at. I'm not saying I've made it. There's been a lot of struggles in the past 7 months, truth be told. But when I look at what I get to do on a daily basis, who I'm around, who I get to associate with, yeah, I am happy for sure. But there are moments in life where it's like, hey, I wish this thing was better, or I wish I could be doing this instead right now. And that's why I think it's subjective. But overall, I am happy. For those who are listening, don't worry, I'm happy.
Yeah, and so we, you, me, Jess, and a few other people were out in Utah recently, and we got a little bit into the trip. You and Jess, by the way, and for anybody listening, Jess's episode of the podcast is 86, and it's well worth listening to. But you guys just crack me up. Your dynamic in your relationship is hilarious. It reminds me a lot of the way my wife and I kind of like, joke with each other. And I didn't find out until well into the trip that your car had been stolen, right? Like just before the trip, and you would have never known on the surface that that happened to you. So, like, how do you manage something like that and still show up and be positive with your car just being stolen?
Yeah. So to paint a time frame for you, that was actually the Project Endure run, that morning of I came back and found out my car was stolen. So, a week after, a big race, ran with, Project Endure, came back to go to work, and there was no car. And, yeah, that was a hard moment. One of those moments that's like there's a bunch of prelude moments where you think everything's fine, and then you walk out to something like that. And how do I show up to moments in front of people? I think it stems just as a profession of what I do. I'm a personal trainer. I think, and my viewpoint on this lifestyle, on this occupation is it is not about you for that hour. You learn over time to put your feelings, your emotions, truth be told, your life on pause until that hour or maybe several hours after your clients are done. And I think that's where it stems from. And it's so easy for me to put that on pause or even hide it completely. I found out I'm very good at doing that without even knowing. Um, so when I'm around other people and you see this big smile, just like anybody, there is a lot going on that I'm struggling with, especially just getting a new car 3 months prior to that. And yeah, so we could keep going back on that moment, but I do think as a profession, that's what it ends up dialing back to is being able to show up for other people when the moment calls for it.
Yeah, and I would just extrapolate from that and say it's also about showing up, knowing that it's not just about you and being able to compartmentalize different areas of life. I think is a skill that's very valuable in a lot of different professions, dare I say every profession. Um,
Yeah.
and so with that being said, Justin, let's get into some of the deep stuff. I'll ask you the first big question of the podcast, which is when you look back at your life to this point, what's the hardest thing or circumstance that you've had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
Yeah, and I knew this question was coming. Um, and I think there's two things that come to mind. And I'm gonna go with one because I know, and what I want to hit on will probably come up as well. But in the original question, you asked me, who am I? In my previous 6 months, I would have been able to say I am a gym owner. Um, that was what I identified as. I am someone who's always been able to identify as something. And for a long period of my life, it was as an athlete, being able to play football in college, hopes and dreams to make it to NFL, and then transition into post graduating what life is. That's as a personal trainer. And I opened up a gym at 25 years old. Um, Funded everything myself, didn't take a dollar from anybody. And I was very, very happy about that. And following along that story, I was open for 9 months. And from a business standpoint, I was in the green and things were going great until one morning I was training someone at 5 o'clock in the morning. Someone came down and said, "Hey, your music's really loud." And said it in a different way. She said, "It sounds like you're having a concert down here." And my response was, "Well, I am." And it was a one on one session. I play my music loud, truth be told. And fast forward, the landlord and I had negotiations. I had to turn down my music because he moved a residential unit above my gym. And long story short, I did not turn my music down completely. And I actually got kicked out of the lease. So all this money I invested, all this time, all these resources, all these opportunities I said no to, which were invested, were stripped away from me over overnight. And I had a month to figure out where to go. And that's where life is right now. There's a couple things that happen outside of that and after that where I put a band-aid on it, partnered with another gym. It just wasn't the vibe. And so I had to shut down my first gym, and only gym to this point. And that was hard, and I'm still dealing with that. To identify as a gym owner and now not when people ask, "Hey, who are you?" And so it's a tough question these days.
Is there any embarrassment tied to any of that, or is it more internal struggle that you face?
Definitely both. I am accepting it. I know my story with that is not over, but when you identify as a gym owner or a business owner, and that's how people see you. And I tell this story often is people viewed me as this athlete in high school, this athlete in college when I come back hometown. And people would say, "Oh, like you have a shot at going to NFL." And I would believe and I would chase that carrot. And then you go down that slope, you don't make it. There's that embarrassing feeling, but then you go back up by opening up a gym and doing well, and so, yeah, there is an embarrassing aspect to it when you're in front of people who know you previously and say, "Hey, how's the gym going?" "Oh, I had to close it, actually." It's a hard pill to swallow, but at the same time, I'm confident in saying it. I stand tall when I say it. It's embarrassing to me. I don't necessarily care how they view me. It's more or less, "Hey, I know how you're looking at me right now, but I'm not done."
So, I have a question that I'm not sure you have a quick answer to, and if not, we can
Yep.
circle back. But if you had to strip away all of the external identities, athlete, gym owner, personal trainer, et cetera, who would you be if you couldn't attach it to anything outside of yourself?
Mm. I think this might just be an adjective, but I've always been someone who doesn't give up quickly. Um, when people doubt me, it turns me up a little bit. I want to prove them wrong. And that's a lot of where my life has come from and probably the success that I've had in a short period of time is because I want to prove people wrong who don't doubt me. And I could go down this list, but I think to just focus on one, it's someone who's not gonna give up regardless of the circumstances, whatever life is thrown at him, and he's gonna keep going no matter how ugly it is.
Mm. So it reminds me of a conversation that I had with Mike Zacco on the podcast, who we both know, episode 67. And Mike talked about identifying with characteristics, not titles, and being a hard worker, being a competitor, being X, Y, and Z, things that can't be taken away from us and things that can be channeled into anything that we do. And I think that gives us a sturdier foundation to move from because if the gym gets lost or this thing happens or something gets stripped from us, we can't lose those things about ourselves that are inside and within our control. And I'll throw this out there, and maybe this is an interesting conversation. I think we're similar in a lot of ways, and it is so hard for me to not identify with those external things, with being an athlete or a business owner or a coach. And at the same time, sometimes I can take for granted the fact that I'm a husband or have this relationship that's amazing and like the best thing in my life. And yet I don't always go to that first to identify there. And I don't know why that is. And it's something that I've been trying to figure out for myself. But does that resonate at all with you?
Absolutely. I actually just had a conversation about this in the field that we're in. I think this is the honest truth, and I don't think I would be the trainer I am today or have the reputation I have in the small pond that I do if I wasn't able to do the physical aspects that I can do. I think that plays a huge part in who I am and any small wins that I do get. And so the conversation I had was if I wasn't, say I was unfortunately unable to do all of those things that make me who I feel like me, how would I then be viewed and would I be able to do what I do? And that's a hard question to ask. And you can play that as a long-term game. You know, where's your future going if it is depending on those aspects? And recently in life, those are hard things. And to backtrack, I faced a couple other unfortunate series that led up to the car being stolen. Um, I had surgery. I crashed my bike. After it was down in Austin, Texas. We were to the marathon. A couple weeks after that, I crashed my bike. I had surgery, and then 3 weeks after that, I'm driving to my gym in a sling, which I should not have been doing, but it does not matter. I hydroplaned on 95. It was a solo accident, and I slammed right into a wall. And so there's two incidents right there that could have been very, very different that the conversation we're having right now could have been a real reality for me. And that's a hard lens to look at when I think about where I am today and where I want my future to go. So it's hard. It definitely is to not identify as those external things.
For sure, for sure. Now, part of the conversation, and I believe this is the other hard thing you were alluding to, you lost the gym and the gym had a lot of meaning to you. Can you
Yes.
tell us why the gym had meaning to you and tell us about that story?
Yes. So the gym is named 28 reasons in Roman numerals XXV, three I reasons. And that started as a personal brand long before the gym happened. And there's a reason behind it. And for a long time, 4 years, I'd never told this story unless someone asked. And there was no social media aspect to it. There was no real conversation if I didn't trust you or you weren't close to me aspect to it. Where the 28 comes from is I lost a dear friend. He was my locker mate in college. And so if you know how a college locker room is set up, it goes in numerical order. I was at the end, so there was no one to the left of me, but there was someone to the right. I was number 29. My friend Gus Lee was number 28. Gus was 2 years younger than myself. It was the end of the season. I had just completed my last season. We were heading to finals. I got done finals pretty early. So I headed home and I got a call from another one of our teammates, his really close friend, asking if I knew where Gus was. Unfortunately, I found out that Gus had took his life. He committed suicide, and that was probably one of the hardest moments of my life. And when we talk about knee buckling, you crumble moments. That happened. I got the call. I found out ahead of the team because I was out of the area. They had a team meeting. I found out, and I just fell to the floor. That's a hard aspect, especially as your role on the team. You're the older player, you're the team captain, you feel a responsibility over the younger athletes. And to hear he took your life, knowing he was so close to you in friendship and proximity, it definitely took a lot. And to expand on how 28 Reasons came about, I had no ambition to ever open up a gym at this moment. Um, Unfortunately, the aspect of suicide I've been around. Not personally, I've not tried to take my life, but I know people who have. Growing up, Gus would be the fourth person that I know to take their life. And I can backtrack a couple others. But to keep moving forward, that is where it stemmed from. And my viewpoint on fitness, on well being, on this whole world that we're all into is like we said, like we could be done with our physical aspects. And unfortunately, Gus wasn't able to do certain things due to a concussion. Now, I know there's a certain aspect, and the questions will be asked about CTE. That was ruled out. But I know that was hard for him not being able to lift how he wanted to play how he wanted to. And movement is a privilege. It is truly a privilege. And so, what I set out to do is change people's lives through fitness. And I think you can attest this as well. I'm sure you've had this message, but it's not until a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years later where someone you've been training or someone you've been around for a long time comes up to you and says out of the random, "Hey, Justin, hey, Joe, during this time a year ago, I was really struggling and you saved my life." Um, Hearing that is priceless. And you don't know this as a coach. You will never see it as it's happening. But to hear those words and know that impact is there and you get to do that on a daily basis makes those early mornings and those late nights and those long hours much, much, much worth it. So that's the story of how 28 Reasons came about. And I do want to note this, and this is just not my story. This is not just me. I was not the only one affected by it. Gus was a brother. Gus was a son. Gus was a best friend. And people to this day have the same proximity to this, even more than I do. I didn't want it to seem like I was trying to benefit from him in a financial aspect, which is why I kept it so close for so long. But having connection with his mother on social media and seeing, hey, thanks for keeping our son's name in your work is a privilege at this point, and I will continue to spread that.
You wanna share a little bit about what you do after you run a marathon these days?
Yeah, so I've completed two regular marathons. Technically, it's three, but we'll just go with two. So any marathon that I complete and I have a number that I know I want to hit, I'll run an extra 1.8 miles after the mileage. And so for those who are listening, if you don't know what a marathon distance is, it's 26.2 miles. I'll run a 1.8 extra every time to honor my friend Gus, who wore number 28 to make it 28 miles.
That's so cool. If you look back and let's just say for the sake of this conversation, you could go back in time to the last time you saw Gus, is there anything you would have said or done differently?
Oof, I've never been asked that. I think I would just hug him. If I couldn't change what happened, I think I'd be a lot more present in our conversations, a lot more present as we sat next to each other, tying our cleats to head out of practice, checking each other's swag to make sure we're cool. Um, but honestly, just give him a big hug and tell him that it's okay. You're gonna get through it. And tell him I love him.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So as we move forward in this conversation, we've talked about a number of hard things already that have gone
Yeah,
on in your life this year and just in general, but you've also chosen a lot of hard things for yourself. Uh,
for sure.
and when you think about all those hard things that you've chosen, what's the hardest thing that you've chosen to do on purpose, and why'd you choose to do that thing?
Yeah. I think to this date, choosing a hard thing besides opening up a gym because business is hard. Um, but Ironman, that was that was a hard one. I always knew I wanted to do Ironman after getting into the endurance world, and to backtrack where I got started was definitely I was a COVID born runner. Was not a runner before that. Once I completed my first 5K, I was like, let's go. But Ironman, I completed a full Ironman this past summer. I did it down in Cambridge, Maryland. So Ironman, Maryland. And that was hard. No doubt about the training for it was hard, especially bouncing back 5 months prior to that, having a shoulder surgery. Um, it was not easy. I could have easily forfeited it. But knowing and embracing the hardness of that, that is definitely the hardest thing I've done to date so far.
I remember you had the sling on, you came to the Project Endure event, and you had asked me some question. You said, "Is it alright if I run, like, a couple weeks after surgery?" I forget what it was, and I think I told you, "I can't say yes or no, but probably not, just to be safe." And then I think I saw a story of you running, not too long after
Yeah.
that. But so take us from, you're in a sling, you had the surgery, and you're deciding, "I'm still gonna pursue this thing." So you're starting from a little bit of a disadvantage, but you're still gonna go for it. Why make that decision?
So I was signed up for Ironman Lake Placid for this. So I had my race calendar set out. I was going to do High Rocks before Austin, Texas Marathon, the Austin, Texas, a few of the smaller Philly runs. And then I was going to go for Ironman Lake Placid. So that was on the calendar. Got injured. It would have been a 3.5 month goal to bounce back for that. I went to a doctor who I absolutely trusted. And I asked him if that is even realistic for me to do, knowing the answer is going to be no, but hoping that he would give me a yes after 3.5 months. He's like, there's no way you'd be able to do this and not get injured again. I said, okay, what about 5 months? He said, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to tell you it's going to be hard and I don't recommend it, but you could do it. Well, once I got those words, I was like, I'm locked in. I'm doing Cambridge, Maryland. I would love to do Lake Placid just because of the history with the course, but that was the next available one in the US in proximity to where I live. So I went for it. I signed up, did maybe about a month and a half, 2 months of swim training. That sucked. That hurt a lot swimming with the shoulder, but I was able to bike and maintain my fitness through biking.
And so you get all the way up to the race, you're prepared. It's race morning. Can you take us
Yeah.
through that day?
Yeah, so I was amped up to toe the line again. This is the first competition I get to do after being in a sling, and I am a competitor. I've always been a competitor. I foresee myself doing this for a long, long time. And a hard thing for me during the course of surgery and being what I called it sidelined, seeing everybody else race, see everybody else tackle these big milestones. And like we talked about, this is my identity. So why isn't Justin doing this? Why isn't he out there? Why can't he go set a PR on whatever race this is? And it sucked. Mentally it sucked. And I was in a dark place, Joe. So when that morning came, I was full cylinders, ready to go, enter the pain cave, meet those dark moments and enjoy them. So we show up to the morning of, it's 5:30 in the morning, and we get the notification that the race, the swim portion is going to be delayed. And I'm like, no way is this happening. So they cut it from a 2.4 mile swim down to a 1.2 originally. Then they cut it down again to only 1,000 meters, right? And I'm like, no way. Like, why is this happening? I'm in my head. I trained for this. I'm ready for this. And truth be told, I was definitely upset that we couldn't do the full swim. But I think, and I fully support the decision, those waters were rough. They were not for everybody. I may have been even at risk. They were so choppy. So we did 1,000 meters in the water. It was in and out 20 minutes. And then after you spend 50 miles on the bike out of 112, you kind of realize that the swim is just a warm up, no matter the 2.4, the 1.2, or 1,000. Once you get on the bike, that is where the race really is starting to take a toll on it. And so I had a fun bike. I had a great day on the bike, and then after that ran a decent marathon time for what I wanted. Few dark moments on there as well, but at the end of it, my total time was a 9:38 on the day, which a lot of people look at me like, "Are you serious? You did that?" And I'm proud of it. I'm happy about it, but I know the swim portion adds, another hour on it. So I always tell people after that time. So really, at most, it would have been a 10:38 time for the Ironman Maryland.
Still fast. Still fast.
I had a good bike. I had a goal for sub 6. I did the bike in, I think it was like 5:25, give or take a couple minutes on that. And then I ran a 3:40 marathon following the bike, which I came out so hot on the run. I felt like I was going to do the whole thing right up the bike. I was averaging a 7:27:30 pace for the first 8 miles off the bike. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna calm down a little bit. Back then, I know we got a full marathon ahead, and my goal was to take it back and then dial it back up. And so around mile 12, after going from a 7:20 pace to about an 8:30 pace, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back into the sevens now. Whew. I uh I met my maker for sure. So there was a point in the race where I actually had to walk, and I hate walking during races, but it got to a point where, okay, I took some Coca-Cola, grabbed some crackers, I walked a little bit, and when that happens, there's time sensors that go on. And so it looks like for those who are tracking me, like, oh, Justin is stopped down right now. So I pick up, and what do you know? Jess is right at the next point that we can see each other. And she starts running with me. Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm in a dark place. For those of you who are marathon runners, ultra marathon runners, Ironman, you get to this dark place. I was there. I wasn't really vocal, but she was there. Love to have her there. Still had a great race, and I finished out at 8:3:40 marathon time. So good day in the books, but man, that hurt for a couple days.
Where does your mind go in those dark moments? I mean, what's running between the ears?
Yeah. Um, I think for me, and when it comes to these longer races, it's a matter of how quick can you get to those spots. If you can get there on a marathon, you can get there at mile 3. I think you're doing really well, and you've trained your mind the right way. And so for me, I got there on the bike pretty early on, and it stems back to why I do what I do. I was like, I have an ability to push myself that a lot of people don't have that privilege right now. Whether that's because they're no longer here with us on this earth, or they physically had something happen to them that they wish they could be doing. And so I think about that all the time when I'm out on the bike or the run in a competitive aspect, or even in my training. I think about Gus. I think about other people who have committed suicide, and the life that I know and the impact that they had on loved ones in my life. And then it's people who I know who cannot do this anymore, who wish they could. And when I was in the sling, when I was hurt, I was like, when I get back out there, I'm releasing hell. I have no apologies to be made. I have no sympathy for my body in a healthy way, that is. But when you're sidelined and you're not able to do the thing that you love to do, and you know you're gonna come back, and those moments then come, that's when you get to test yourself and be like, "Hey, are you about this shit or not?" And I ask myself those questions, "Am I about this shit or not?" And I better say yes, or else I'm just walking around here barking a loud bark.
That's a great question. That is a great question that I think we can all ask ourselves in many different areas of life. And because you brought it up again, after we transitioned to this most recent question, I couldn't help but feel I cut the last conversation a little short. And you brought up Gus again, and I'm just wondering if you ever have conversations in your mind with Gus, or if there are things you would say to Gus now if he were still here, or how you would like to make Gus proud. I mean, during those races in those dark places, are you doing any of those things?
Am I having conversations with him?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm having conversations with him in an aspect that I'm looking for an answer. I'm more or less saying stuff to him, saying, you know, "Hey, I know you're watching me and I'm doing this for you," or, "I know what you were going through," and for everybody out there, and we all do. I don't care what your bank account looks like. I don't care what your happiness level is. If you were to rate it, you're all going through it. I'm going through it. We all are. And for those who have made that decision to take their life, I put myself in that spot where I try to be like, okay, when we talk about dark spot, that's where I kind of go to just to feel it with no actionable steps after it. But like when I'm on the race, when I'm on the bike and things start to hurt, whatever they were feeling had to have hurt so much worse to then take that next step. And so I think everybody has an aspect of what the dark place is and what that means to them. That's what my dark place looks like. And I want to put myself there because what I'm feeling in the moment is only physical. And that's why I think it's more than the physical.
I think pain is a privilege, and, you and I both know Kellen Matthews. He was, I believe, episode 58 of this podcast, and one of the things that he said that stood out to me was after overcoming his heroin addiction, he realized that no physical pain that he could put himself through was as bad as what he had been through, and he knows it stops when he stops, and that's why he's able to push so hard.
Mm,
And I think pain truly is a privilege, and especially when we choose that pain to be able to go to those deep places at will and to come back out of them and to be back in life and experience all the things we get to be grateful for is this really interesting and really beautiful journey from dark to light and light to dark. And so I appreciate
yeah.
you sharing that. And I would love to hear about any of the dark places you were in at the New York City Marathon because I was there. I saw you around mile 16. You looked really good. And I actually thought the tracker was off when you got near the end of the race because I thought to myself, I was like, no way these numbers are right. And so
Yeah.
I would love to hear about that race for you.
Yeah, so this is a great transition from Kellen to this race. So I spent a lot of my Saturday mornings at 5 a.m. with Kellen Matthews. And if you have not heard Kellen's story, go back to the podcast with him and Joe. He is an amazing guy. He's an amazing friend. I really do look at him as a role model. Not just in this space, but just in life. He is a dog dad to two German Shepherds and he is now a father. So he's a great guy to have in your corner. And so I spent a lot of mornings with Kellen at 5 a.m. on Saturday, and he was in my mind on race day. This dude pushed the shit out of me on Saturday mornings at paces that I never thought I'd be able to hold in my life. And so I had the goal of running the New York City Marathon at a I wanted to qualify for Boston, to put it short. And that's a 2:55 marathon time, which is a 6:40 average pace over the course of the whole marathon. And I went for it. And for context sake, my other marathon, which is the Austin Marathon, I finished it in, I believe, like 3:25. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go big. I'm gonna set a huge goal for this. After training like this, I'm gonna go and qualify for Boston. And Jess and I talked a lot about qualifying together. We both had ambitions on doing this. But on my end, Kellen's running with me the whole marathon, really. And I was averaging, might have been even below a 6:40 up until around mile 18 and 20 is where I would say I started to feel the race. It hurt in all the right ways, all the ways I expected it to hurt, and even a little bit unexpected on the Queensboro Bridge. But at mile 20, I recorded my first seven pace, which was a 7:15, and then after that was a 7:20, which is still not bad. I still could have done this Boston qualifier, right? And then I recorded an 8:30 pace. Truth be told, I don't even remember seeing the 8:30 pace. I just remember blurriness, pain, and a lot of feelings that I didn't even feel in my Ironman. And you hear this word of bonking out. And I bonked out on runs and training. I bonked out on, maybe the tail end of Ironman, but with the Ironman, it wasn't necessarily, hey, I'm trying to get this specific time. I'm just trying to have a good time. And so after recording an 8:30 pace, I actually completely stopped. I needed water. There was this random two ladies on the side who had endless cups, and I must have, I'm not even lying, taken down 15 cups of electrolyte fluid. I didn't even care what it was. And to this, like I've talked about this a lot in the past week and a half. Am I upset about the time? Yeah. Am I upset about my attempt? No. And this is what I've said to my classes and my personal sessions. I like ending with a little note here. I truly believe and I'm very confident and certain that if I would have toed the line that day and say, hey, I want to go run a 3:20, I could have done it. Hey, I want to run a 3:15, I could have done it. Hey, I want to run a 3:10 or 3:05, I could have done it, right? But I said, fuck that. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to be in New York City. I'm going to choose the hard route here. I'm going to go for a 2:55 marathon, knowing damn well this is the hardest year ever to qualify for Boston Marathon, which is a 2:55. And previously it was a 3-hour marathon. All you had to do was run sub 3 hours and you would have done it. But what the fuck is the point of that? And I went for it. I'm very happy about my race. I'm happy about the city of New York. And I know I pushed my limit that day. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the race and what I've taken from it is I know I pushed my limit to the definition of its limit and I was walking. I cramped up my whole legs, my hamstrings, my quads, my calves. Some random guy told me to walk backwards. I thought that was a great idea. I started to do that. I took 2 steps. I nearly fell to only turn back around and see a cop and a medic start looking at me, tell me, "Hey, let's go off." I said, "Don't touch me." I said, "Do not touch me. I'm finishing this." And we finished the race. Total time on the day was a 3:19 marathon, which is still a PR for me. But knowing that those were my splits and where I could have been, it's hard being a competitor, but at the same time, grand scheme of things, I got to run the New York City Marathon with some badass people and see a crowd that is you can only dream of is was truly a privilege.
Yeah, and I think there's a takeaway for anybody listening in there that when you truly go for it and you are audacious with the goal, you might fall short. And in your case, you still ended up with a PR. But it's not necessarily about the outcome, it's about the effort. And you gave all of your effort to that goal. And I think that's something to be very proud of. I also have a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that'll transition into the next question. And so he said, whatever course you decide upon, there is always someone to tell you that you are wrong. There are always difficulties arising which tempt you to believe that the critics are right. To map out a course of action and follow it to the end requires courage. And I'm curious for you how that quote maybe interplays with the concept of endurance and really what the word endurance means to you.
Yeah. I think hearing that quote and thinking about the word endurance is multifaceted. We talk a lot, and a lot of what people talk about is the physical efforts that they do. Um, and I think this goes back to why I'm still even going with where I'm going in life, to this day in terms of a profession. I could have easily said, "Hey, I'm gonna throw in the towel after closing the gym," which I did not want to do. I'm gonna stop personal training. I'm not gonna try and rebuild what I did build. And I think that's why we do train hard. I think that's why we push our body. We find new limits. We set PRs not for the gram, not to say we did this physical feat, but to prove to ourselves that, hey, when all shit hits the fan in life, because it will come for everybody at some point or another. That is why we train. There's this term of training for life that I've heard, and it's true. It really is true. And for the people who don't understand or can't resonate with why some people go out on an 18-mile run and call it fun, or go ruck 150 miles or run 50 miles, whatever it is, whatever audacious you go out in a physical sense, I'm doubling down on that person when life hits them in the face to get back up and keep going because they chose that route. They chose to put their body through absolute hell to where this thing called life tries and tests you. And it might test you in ways that you can't even fathom, but to know that you can get up and keep going, I think that's a lot of where I think endurance. And so the word endurance is not knowing where you're necessarily going, not knowing if that thing is going to end, but trusting in the mission that you're on and believing. And I think hearing that word and saying it now, I'm thinking about it more so than ever, but believing that goal and that objective will come, but you have to have faith. You have to keep going. And if you stop, your dream, your goals, your aspirations will then stop with it.
Ooh, I like that. Um,
Yeah, that one. Oof.
so
You got me thinking, Joe.
That's good, that's good. I hope the people listening are thinking as well, and it was funny, we were we were at dinner while we were traveling together, and I forget who I was speaking with, but I was asking them questions, and you made a joke about, "Feels like we're on the podcast," and, so now it's such a pleasure to be able to be here and ask you questions on the podcast, and I guess the question that's coming to mind is, I agree 100% with that definition of endurance, of getting back up, of pursuing the things that are meaningful to us. In your mind or in your life, are there ever instances where it makes sense to maybe not quit, but drop something that no longer makes sense or pivot away from something you were once committed to?
Absolutely. Um, and I think that's the nature of the beast of being an entrepreneur or starting a business or starting a new job. And you can apply this to whatever you're going through. But for me, I could have definitely said, I'm going to go. Okay, I had no control over closing the gym at all. It was unfortunate, but what am I going to do about it? That's the next step that I had to focus on. And I had a handshake deal with a partner gym that I'm not going to dive in too much because I'll just say this business does get ugly, and it becomes unfortunate. But I could have definitely said, I'm going to keep along this train, even though it didn't make financial sense to me to keep doing it, but to keep this dream alive for my people, for the community that I'm trying to hold intact. That was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I need to pause and look at this from a bigger aspect and make sure that does this actually apply to where I'm going?
Mm.
Or am I just giving my life away with it? And at that moment, I was like, it's done. Where I'm at right now in a physical aspect, which I was holding on to for dear life, Joe, and was the hardest thing to let go of. But I know there's this picture on Instagram. It's like sometimes letting go is actually the right move. And that was one of those moments. Probably the darkest spot of my life. I was injured. I had to close a business. I just got in a car crash. There was a death in the family. Um, and all of that leading into a decision of, do I keep going and harming myself, or changing courses and hoping and trusting that everything's gonna be okay? That was one of those moments where I learned to pivot, and it is okay to pivot. And if you're someone out there who is holding on to dear life and your identity is attached to it, think about this on a grand scheme and think about if you're hurting yourself and that will actually maybe literally kill you, or if pivoting will actually save you and you get a chance to create a rebirth or create this again with better knowledge, better experience, and better understanding. So that's my viewpoint on pivoting.
I agree with that. And I think oftentimes people look at leaving something or changing a commitment as quitting. And in the grand scheme of things, like you said, sometimes pivoting and letting go of something you thought you once needed so much is actually the right move to create space for whatever is going to come next. And it's really hard because letting go of something is almost losing a part of ourselves.
Yeah.
But as I've heard it said, you can't be who you once were and who you want to become at the same time. And so in order to change and grow and evolve, we have to leave pieces of our prior self behind all the time. And so hopefully that message found somebody out there listening who needed it. I'm sure it did. And this is how we wrap things up, Justin. It's my favorite part of the podcast. But if somebody out there is going through a hard time, a dark season, a tough chapter, and they just don't know where to go or what to do, and you got a chance to speak to them, what would you say?
Mhm. I think I would want you to listen to what we talked about today. And I want you to know that I'm standing here today, whoever you are, as someone who is a work in progress, who is still fighting. I am not what I would say a success story. I have done a few things that are successful, but that is not going to carry me to where I'm going. I failed miserably. I will fail again. I might fail tomorrow. And for that person who I'm trying to reach, if everything that you're trying to do right now keeps coming up short, or you failing, or you're not getting it, whatever it is, a position, a promotion, an opportunity, I challenge you to keep on going. And especially when it gets dark, and not give up. Because I promise you this, that if you do give up, it is done. It is over. And that is not the way to go. But if you do keep fighting tooth and nail and you just say, hey, one more day, one more chance, that opportunity will get closer and closer and closer. And this is part of your story to keep going.
Mm. You only lose if you quit, and that's the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Joe.
And so, Justin, if people want to follow along with what you're doing, if they want to reach out, ask a question, or just connect, where's the best place for people to do that?
Yeah, I would say Instagram. I am connecting with people a lot on Instagram. And if you are in the Philadelphia area at this point, come take my class at Barry's. Come on Friday or Saturday. It's fun. I control the programming. It's tough, and that's what we're all about. So definitely reach out to me on Instagram, shoot me a DM. But also, Joe, again, I just want to highlight you. I know we've shared some similar people. You have changed lives, and I'm here to tell you, man, that you definitely changed mine. Looking at someone that I want to be like, and the outreach that you have. So keep this alive as you are. I can't wait to see where this grows 10 years, 20 years from now. So, congratulations to you, and keep doing your thing, Joe.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate you just as much, and I can't wait to keep growing our friendship.
Let's do it, man. Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.